Good morning. I'd like to call the Community Service and Public Safety Committee meeting for Monday, February 12th, 2024 to order. We're going to, we usually say the pledge, and it's never on here, so I'm going to add it. Pledge allegiance to
the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now if we can adopt our agenda for today.
So moved.
All in favor, raise your right hand. And approval of the minutes from the regular meeting of January 8th, 2024.
So moved.
All in favor, raise your hand. Good. And Kim, are there any appearance by citizens today?
Yes, ma'am. I've got 3. Gail Sokas? Did I say that right?
Good morning. My name is Gail Saugus, and I live on Margarita Court in Hilton Plantation. I'm closely following the town's progress toward regulating the unchecked use of pesticides since I witnessed a landscape contractor. Pardon? I witnessed a contractor who was spraying herbicides at the Mid-Island track where I was walking my dog. Stopped and spoke with him and asked him what he was doing, and he told me they were doing that so that they didn't have to bother to mow around the trees. I asked if he was going to post where he had sprayed so I could avoid walking through it, and he just laughed. Other residents have spoken here about their worries for the health and the health of their pets and the other wildlife on the island because of the toxic chemical use, including Roundup's been used on our beaches, our parks, and other open common areas. It seems to me that the issue boils down to whether or not the well-being of the citizens who voted for you to represent them is more important than pristine landscape and protecting the chemicals that they are using. I'm stunned that there's any question on which one is more important, particularly since there's proven fiscally sound organic alternatives available. Participation in the incentive programs that's sponsored by the companies the town purchases the chemicals from using our taxpayer money should be banned. It perpetuates buying more and more chemicals at taxpayers' expense, and it disincentivizes using safer methods. So lastly, I'm urging you to table or reject any proposed IPM before the current one is made available to the town council. Why would you replace what you haven't seen and haven't been able to review? Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Pamela Ovens.
Yeah. And just, it sounds like even when we speak, and I'm not sure if there's any adjustment that can be made to the.
Was it better at
It
the
was a little bit
end?
better, but it's echoing.
Hello? Oh, it sort of is echoing. Maybe if I talk back here. Can I go ahead?
Right one.
Hello?
Better?
Talk. Is that better?
So far, so good. We'll try that. Thank you. Okay.
I'm Pamela Martin Ovens, and I'm honored to be allowed to speak to you today. I drove to Reidsville, Georgia last Thursday. It's a 2.5 hour trip. I drove back Friday. There was not one dead bug on my car, grill, or windshield. Think about that. Not one bug. It makes my hair stand on end when I think about what we have done to the environment. It makes my hair stand on end, and I have experienced that firsthand while sailing in a thunderstorm. I watched the Hilton Head Raptor camera, and there are 2 adult owls and 2 owlets occupying the nest that eagles shared last year. I watched the male bring a rat to the female before her eggs had hatched. It worried me that the rat could have eaten a rodenticide. The male brought another rat to the nest yesterday. When we poison the rats, we poison the raptors. Please allow the raptors to do their job. There are better ways to control this. if you introduce a family of cats to a neighborhood, there are no rats. It's like a miracle. It is nature at her best. In the new IPM on page 33 or 5, it says rodenticides, chemicals that target rodents. Rodents include rats, mice, squirrels, and the word, etc. Rodenticides will affect all living things, specifically birds of prey. That's what I would like added in. Under G, the second sentence should go under herbicides. In the IPM, the following statement should be made. This IPM will supersede all previously approved IPMs. Under policy on the first page, after the words Hilton Head Island, it should say, with the goal of expanding this to the entire island. Under B, small letter A, where it says proper maintenance of plants, say, as this relates to pollen production. Part F, glyphosate. Please add, and other known carcinogens like paraquat, rotenone, etc. I agree with Councilwoman Bryson that any statement of economic loss or impact will be decided by town staff and not by the applicator. On page 4, where it says approvals and application of chemical pesticides, under 5, regarding signage, please say, signage must include approved pesticide and application date and a link to the town's website. The link directs you to the IPM program and a list of all approved pesticides. I completely agree with Councilwoman Bryson's changing words will to shall. Page 4, number 3, where it says chemicals may be say on site. Thank you.
Mrs. Evans, Pam, can I ask you a question? So I know there's a document that was left at each of our seats. Is
Yes.
everything that you just commented on within this document?
Not everything, but just the last little thing. There, I got it all in.
Oh, you got it all.
Okay.
Okay. Can I just ask you a favor? Because I know you're always extremely active and interested. If we can get it ahead of time so that we can digest it before we come to a
Okay.
meeting. Feel free to email me anything. And if you want to just email to me, I'll make sure the entire committee gets it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Kim Conti.
Good morning, Community Services and Public Safety Committee. Do you guys remember when there were smoking sections on planes? As a kid, I remember thinking adults clearly knew better, right? Yet here we are once again, where in some upside-down universe heavily sponsored by the chemical industry, we are allowing known carcinogens to be sprayed where our children and pets play. Why? For purely cosmetic reasons. Again, as adults, shouldn't we know better? Sadly, for the town of Hilton Head, the answer is no, for now. After meeting with town staff in 2022 concerning the town's unchecked use of Roundup, here we are in 2024, and our parks, playgrounds, beaches, and public spaces and soccer fields where our children play, safe from Roundup? No. How is staff continuing to ignore the mounting and peer-reviewed science, including the research from the Environmental Protection Agency, that glyphosate kills or injures 93% of the total list of endangered species, both plants and animals? Per the EPA, glyphosate also adversely modifies critical habitat for 96% of all species, which critical habitat has been designated. Again, why does staff continue to only work to protect continued use of this known ecocide per the EPA? Who is financially benefiting from the continued use of Roundup? Why is staff refusing to include a simple way to safeguard public funds from the sad reality of these prepaid cashback programs that provide Visa gift cards? The reality is it incentivizes increased use of chemicals, making it rain prepaid Visa gift cards in the more you spray, the more we pay programs. More alarming, according to the Department of Pesticide Regulation at Clemson University, The town of Hilton Head has an integrated pest management policy in place, an IPM that town staff confirmed yet has failed to produce. I have brought printouts from both DPR and town staff to be included for public record. As a town and community, all of you up there on the dais have tremendous responsibility to protect constituents, wildlife, and our island. Just like smoking sections on planes, thankfully, that are a thing in the past, roundup in parks where the most vulnerable play must become history. It's time to leave behind this dark era relying on a known carcinogen for purely cosmetic reasons. Hilton Head is better than this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
That's all.
That's it. Okay. Thank y'all. New business. Josh is going to present us with a consideration of an ordinance to amend Title 8, Chapter 3 of the Town of Hilton Head Island Code of Ordinances to add Section 83114, titled Abandoned Watercraft. Thank you.
Morning.
Good morning.
Just want to go over some of the materials that were included in the packet. This subject was something that staff was asked to research based upon a number of citizen complaints that had been generated over actually the last several years. This is not necessarily a new issue.
Josh,
Yes.
the right microphone, that one's off. There you go.
There we go. How's that? All right. Normally I don't have a problem with people hearing me. I usually get the opposite, that I'm usually too loud. Again, I'll kind of restart. So this is an issue that has come up over the last several years. It's certainly not new, but it's an issue of kind of dealing with abandoned and derelict vessels that are anchored in the waters that are surrounding Hilton Head Island. And so we've been working both internally and with external groups to try and address this issue. One of the things that we've looked at is that in order to regulate this area, the state has essentially said if a local government is going to do anything with regards to regulating watercrafts, they have set out the code by which if we want to put something into our code, they've dictated to us what it is that we must adopt. There is no flexibility in terms of adopting something else, making modifications. They've said, if you want to do it, this is the way that it'll be done. And so what is presented in your packets today is a copy of that information, what it looks like. And as you can see, if you've read through the draft ordinance, a lot of it requires coordination with state agencies with regards to identifying the owner of the vessel, making efforts to notify and have the owner of the vessel take positive action to address the situation, and only after those steps have occurred do we get to the point where either the state agency or others can intervene and potentially take ownership of that vessel. And so what is being proposed today is an ordinance that would adopt that language into our local code and thereby give clear guidance on how we would proceed with dealing with abandoned watercraft in our territorial waters. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Dave?
Do I understand correctly that this will apply 5 miles out into the ocean and halfway across the Fusky and Skull Creek?
So there's obviously overlapping jurisdictions, which is why a state agency is involved. Yes, in theory, the reach of this could go to the extent that's outlined in the ordinance. In practice, I think we'd be dealing with much more closer defined areas around Hilton Head. You know, things that might be 4 miles offshore aren't something that particularly affect us all that much, whereas a boat that's anchored up in Skull Creek and that people have to look out their backyards day in and day out, those are the kind of calls that we get and we want to be able to try and address.
Thank you.
Alex?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I'm happy that we're taking this up. Although we may not have a packet of all of the complaints, we know that they're there.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with Mr. Gruber as far as aesthetically, it is an issue, but it's also an issue when it comes to those that are using our waterways for food as well.
Sure.
The abandoned vessels do start to take a toll on the wildlife that we all enjoy on Hilton Head. Just a couple of questions. I understand where we're going as far as our code and how it has to align with state code. Do we have any idea how long the process would be if we were to look at having a vessel cleaned and removed?
You know, it kind of varies. And the reason why it varies is it all goes back to how easily or how difficult is it to identify the owner of the vessel. So sometimes it's an easy thing. We can get in touch with the owner. The owner can then sign a form waiving their right, which really expedites the process. And then once that form's in hand, either the state or us, we would have the lawful authority then to go out and remove that vessel. But a number of times, a vessel will get anchored and the serial numbers will be removed and other identifying information ends up being removed. And if you can't identify the owner, then it's very difficult to go down that process because the way the state has their regulations laid out, it's all about finding and notifying the owner before you do something. So in those instances, it could take considerably longer before we would get to the point that we could actually then declare it abandoned, have it noticed. I think it has to be posted for a certain period of time. And then after that time frame is run, then it's considered to be open and available for us to remove.
Okay, and you don't have to answer this right now, but I'm just curious to know, are we as a town now taking the ownership of the identification process, or is that something we're going to be handing off to someone else?
The way I think realistically we see this saying out, it's going to have to be a partnership. We're going to have to work with the state. And it may require us to then become responsible for some portion of it. But that's something that we would plan. We would work into a budget. We would bring to town council for approval. So the adoption of the code does not in and of itself obligate us to anything. It just gives us the ability to take action if we think that that's appropriate. But we also know that there's a number of state and federal grants that are out there that we might be able to try to go chase for this project as well. And so it really kind of depends. There's no financial commitment by adopting this, but it allows us to potentially become more involved in a future situation that could have us with some financial responsibility.
Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's where I was going as far as the financial responsibility is concerned. And to me, this is a lot bigger than issuing someone a fine and expecting them to make good on the removal. There are some cases where we may have to intervene and have it removed ourselves. So I'm happy to hear that there are grant opportunities and ways to, if we identify ownership and remove vessels, to maybe have some reimbursement down the road would be appropriate in my mind. But the bottom line is I think we're going in the right direction. This is a serious issue that we have in our waterways. So those are my questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Patsy?
Thank you. Certainly, in addition to the issues raised, the aesthetics and the food that we enjoy from the waterways is also, of course, a safety issue. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of us are familiar with the famous sailboat that sat out as you cross the bridges for a while. Some folks are melancholy about it and some folks want it removed, but certainly the safety issue is important. And I was wondering, because in the cover letter, it talks about permitting fees but you know, the ordinance itself didn't seem to establish, I couldn't find fees or fines. And so my question was, how are we going to fund this?
Well, there is no internal funding mechanism. There is at the state level. So as part of your, I believe, annual watercraft registration, part of it is you're paying into a fund where the state then has money that it can use to provide cleanup and abandoned vessel removal matters. But in and of what we're proposing, there is nothing that creates a specific fee. It could be that, upon the language that's in there, that it could become a violation to abandon the vessel, at which point a fine could be imposed through the normal code citation process. But there's nothing within what we're proposing where we, the town, would be generating or collecting a fee in any manner.
Yeah, that's a double-edged sword because, you know, I think about the impact on we have lots of folks who own boats here and love them, and I love going out on them. I only had a kayak, so I didn't really, I never abandoned my kayaks. But anyhow, you know, I was a little concerned about generating another fee for our local boat owners, but then now we're going to have to rely upon the state's fund. So, you know, it's a little bit concerning about how that would be managed. I'm hopeful that the state would provide us with assistance, but there's always a question about that kind of reliance. So, but I definitely am supporting something to do away with the abandoned boats because of those reasons we've listed.
Thank you, Patsy. So first of all, great questions from everyone. Many of mine have been answered. But the fee, that's related to a code citation. Do we need something within the, what the code of enforcers use on the island to identify what that would be? Or is that something that's just generally written in that they could rely on?
So I think it's just generally written in there as something that they can rely upon. Again, because the state has really preempted this area, I don't believe that anything that we're considering is going to create something that is unique to us. I believe it all takes place at the state level. What it does allow us, though, by adopting it into our code, it allows us to then invoke the general provisions which says a violation of this code is punishable by a citation. And so that's a little bit more outside of the state language. But because the state says if you're going to adopt it, you have to adopt our language, that's how it gets brought in there.
So on the enforcement issue, if there was a ticket, a citation given, there is something already existing within our municipal code
Yes.
that would allow them to
Correct.
identify a fee, amount.
It's a fine, assuming that
Fine.
you're found guilty,
Fine.
yes. And it's anywhere from $0 to $500 at the discretion of the magistrate court.
Okay, and, so it would, the magistrate would assess the fee, okay, or fine, okay. And then in terms of the grants that are available, is there a preemptive, or is this on a one-off? If it's something happened and we were looking for monies to cover whatever expenses we incurred, that Marcy would, or whoever is assigned, would go off and write a grant for that? Or is there a bucket of money we can say we have access to?
So I couldn't tell you that there's a specific bucket of money that we're going to have access to. It's going to be more writing something, likely in partnership with the state. We have served as kind of a letter of recommendation for grants that the Department of Natural Resources has sought for this specific activity. And so we know that they're out there, they're trying to identify money. I can't tell you that it's a specific pot that says, yes, we'll be able to tap into this much. I think the hope is that we can put together a proposal that says we've identified 8 vessels that are currently in our waters. We've gone through all the steps. We've notified everybody. It's all teed up now that they can actually be removed. Let's get a quote and an estimate and then talk about how we're going to share that cost to remove it. Or, you know, ideally, the funding is there at the state level for this. The question is, how much would they be willing to contribute towards it? And then any difference is something that we could then look to potentially bring forward ourselves.
And I think Alex's question to time frame, which was one of my questions, is kind of one of those big questions, because all of that sounds like it could take a year. In practice, when we've had to do this, and I think we've worked collaboratively with other DNR, whoever, to remove a boat or 2 recently, what was the process then?
So the process, I think, is still somewhat the same, in that it's all about due process, making sure that you notify the owners to the extent that they're identifiable, and if they're not, then going through the requisite notice and advertising process so that you can
How
declare
long did
abandoned.
that take? Was it a matter of weeks, months?
It was months. It was not years, it was months. And my direct involvement was previously with the county, and that was following Hurricane Matthew, where we had a number of them. And so we went through this long process. And ultimately, I would say within about 8 to 9 months, we had gone through the entire process of they'd been out, they'd done their investigation, they'd done their posting, the time frame had passed, and then we were able to move forward and remove them. At that point, using FEMA money to remove those vessels.
I think one
So,
of the things that'll be interesting over the course of some time, I don't know what that time is, time frame again, is how many exist, how many get removed, and how many new ones become problematic. So
So-
once we see that picture, I think it'll be, it'll tell us a bit of information that
Yep.
we want to know.
So we went out, and when I say we, it was the mayor, the town manager, myself, and Bob, specifically for the purpose of mapping and identifying those vessels that appeared to be abandoned or had been left in a very derelict condition. And I think at that time, we identified 8 vessels around the island. And we'd actually taken photographs of them, and there's a website that the state maintains where we were able to submit them along with, you know, kind of the geospatial information from your phone about their specific location. So we know that the state has been notified of these 8 vessels. We know that they've been marked as being in a particular location so that they know where to go down and conduct the investigation. And as of today, I don't know that we're aware that any of them have actually had a lot of movement forward. And so we're hoping that by putting this in place, this is just going to give us more ability to step in and try to force the issue with them about we need to do something to address this situation.
I know in Broad Creek, I think there were a couple that were removed, so that was good news. All right, well, those were all my questions and lots of great information. Thank you. Do we have a motion?
All right, I'm trying to get mine to turn back on. Your questions about the fine. In looking at, we received an opinion letter from Mac DeFord, who is outside counsel for the town in this matter. And his last section talks about existing local regulations in Beaufort and Jasper. And he also talks about the city of Beaufort and town of Port Royal have ordinances that are incompatible with state law and likely illegal because, pardon me, and the last one is levy a $500 fine, which is what you're saying that we would have. But then he goes on to say, which runs afoul with the state's $1,000 minimum fine. And so it seems to be odd, but anyhow.
So, no, that's a great point because I can tell you we have spoken with the city of Beaufort to Port Royal. And it's not that what they put in place was contrary to this, it's that it's been overtaken by the state's actions. And so the state has come in and, as indicated in Mac's letter, said, if a local government's going to adopt regulations, here's the regulations they're going to adopt. Well, all of those other jurisdictions had regulations in place prior to the state passing those changes. And so, yes, they're incompatible with what the state says, but certainly it wasn't by any fault of any of those jurisdictions.
Right.
But question about the fine, yes, that does change. What it changes is the jurisdiction of the magistrate court. Because normally the magistrate court's jurisdiction is a fine punishable by $500, 30 days in jail, or civil matters up to $7,500. So what that does is it raises the magistrate court's jurisdiction in terms of their ability to levy a fine beyond that. And so, yes, we would still issue a citation in the same manner in which we would prosecute other code violations. This section would allow the court, if it found guilty under this particular provision, to impose a $1,000 fine in excess of their jurisdiction.
Okay, for those 2 jurisdictions. So, but as I understand it, you're saying that the municipal code currently has a catch-all, I'll call them catch-all fines.
Yep.
That you're citing within the magistrate's jurisdiction. So, but if the state law says it's got to be a minimum of 1,000 and we've got to comply with those requirements, then how does that work?
My belief is the state law would dictate the magistrate, if they're going to find somebody guilty of that violation, must issue the fine in the amount set forth in the statute. So a specific statutory provision is going to overrule a general statutory provision, at which point they would be required to impose the $1,000 fine because it's specific to that violation.
Then wouldn't it be better for our ordinance to have a provision to say that the penalty as required by state statute, as opposed to the fallback to our $500 catch-all?
Well, so ours is just proposing to adopt the state's code, which is what I believe our interpretation is. If we're going to do something, this is what we must do. And so the language that's in there should state that it is a $1,000 minimum fine. I think what Mac's pointing out is that other jurisdictions' codes, we can't look to that because of timing issues. Theirs are not in line with what the state is. But ours is being proposed to be directly in line with the state's code.
Right, and I guess that's why I'm asking the question of why didn't the draft include that language about the penalty or fine as opposed to the fallback to municipal code of $500 and no more than 30 days. I just didn't see it. Maybe
That's what I was.
could have been I was blinded by all the black lines. I'm not sure. It's somewhere lost in there. I just didn't, when I look for fines or penalties, I always look for a number and.
Yeah, and in this instance, all right. Oh, sorry. So when it's talking about it's prescribed under Title 50 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. So in this section, I think it's referring to the state provisions with regards to penalties and enforcement.
Okay, I can see a magistrate saying you can't do that because it's not set forth in your ordinance, but anyhow, I'll let the lawyers go worry about that, I'll quit playing lawyer.
Josh, doesn't, you talk to this particular question?
It does. It speaks directly to that if you are fined, it must not be less than $1,000, because again, that's coming straight out of the state code.
Thank you, I couldn't see numbers.
Well, it's kind of contradictory. I hate to, it must be fined not less than, I hate to belabor it, but fine not less than $1,000 nor more than 5,000, okay, not more than 5,000. So somewhere in between there, the magistrate has discretion. So everything that we need between, it's stating Title 50 of the South Carolina Code of Laws and that statement under D2, as Alex pointed out, that is all embedded in this ordinance.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. We're all questioned out? Nope, out, as Steve. Oh, okay, Steve's got our motion. Before we do that, let us take the motion, and then I'll ask for public comment. Okay. Go ahead, Steve.
I move that the committee forward the proposed resolution to council with recommendation for approval.
I'll second it.
Thank you. And are there any public comments on this matter? Yes, Pam.
I'm Pamela Martin Evans, and I owned a 62-foot all-wood schooner that we chartered for 16 years. I had my 100-ton sailing license, and that's why we have the Department of Natural Resources. And then if they can't do it, the Coast Guard can. I don't know why we're trying to be the water police. That's it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Melinda?
Good morning, Melinda Tunner. I just had a question. And it had to do whether the language requires that you must remove the watercraft or can remove the watercraft. The reason I'm asking that is I can imagine that any abandonment near our waters is going to be a smaller vessel, but if the way this is written is up to 5 miles out off of our beaches into the ocean, it could be a larger watercraft. So it was must remove or can remove, is my question.
Thank you. Any specific feedback on the question as to must or can?
This section allows for a government to become involved. It is not mandated that a government become involved. It just says, if you're going to, this is the process by which you would go through.
Okay. Thank you. And yes, Alex.
If we're done with public comment, just wanted to make one additional recommendation to staff as we're pushing this through to the full council. Glad that we had folks go out and look, you, the mayor, and others. So now that we know that we have 8, I guess the question that we as council probably need to have answered along the way is, if we were to be successful with going through the process to have them removed, what is that going to cost? Okay, just some preliminary numbers I think will be important for us as we start to discuss budget as far as what we're going to be responsible for and not. I think that's important. I know from past experience, we've seen situations where we've had watercraft that need to be removed pretty quickly, and the town has had to step in and take care of that and wait to get their money back. So I just want us to be mindful of this this area that we're going into, which again, I think is important, but let's be very transparent as to where we're going, okay?
Yeah, and I can tell you, Alex, as soon as we know that there will be a financial need in order to accomplish this, we can bring that forward, either identify it within an existing budget or incorporate that into next year's budget. I think our hope at this point is because these boats have been existing for a while, and because we've notified the state, and because we know that the state should have some funds for this, we'd like for them to step in and do it, but we understand that that may not be necessary because they might not have the resources to. So once we know that information, then we can start building a project budget and have a little bit more specific conversation about what that would consist of.
And to Pam's point, and from the experience from the ones that I didn't see out on the water, but certainly have been called to look at from the shoreline and had people send me pictures of them, those have been removed. So I'm assuming that the other agencies have worked collaboratively with the town when they were notified.
Yes.
So that process still exists. So we're not circumventing, we're not overriding.
No,
we're
no, no.
taking the place of. We'll still go through what the normal channels are, but
Correct. So there's concurrent jurisdiction between the town, the county, and the state. And in theory, if you wanted to add in Bluffton, because of the way that some of our water bodies are situated, an argument can be made that there's overlapping jurisdiction there as well. So I know a couple of the vessels that have been recently removed, I believe, were removed by Beaufort County. Now, I don't know if they received some funding from the state to do that or not, but I know that they were the ones that were contracting for the service. So, no, we're not stepping on anybody's toes. We all have overlapping jurisdiction. A lot of the question comes down to who has the resources to actually do something.
To Ms. Chair's point, I understand, I don't have this as a fact. I've heard this in the wind, Josh, that there's also private entities that are raising monies to affect this cause as well. So that's something that we have to be aware of.
Yes.
That's not regulatory, right?
No. Those are good Samaritans who are wanting to help clean up because of the environmental concerns, the aesthetic concerns, and others. And they're working directly with the state to basically get the ability to then intercede and take some action with regards to those vessels. And so, yes, we can confirm that we understand that there are entities that are out there doing that as well.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry, it raised another question for me, and as it sounds as though what we're missing is some purpose or intent to establish the need for this for local jurisdiction. And what I heard was eight, eight's a relative number. It sounds really big, it sounds really small. And with other jurisdictions as well addressing this issue, it looks as though, and maybe Mr. Brown knows where the purpose intent is that I haven't found. But it sounds as though we need some justification for this, and I don't see that in the recitals, nor in the quick glance at the ordinance draft itself. And since this is a police power, it sounds as though we need some justification.
Sure. Well, I can tell you from a documentation standpoint, if you Googled abandoned vessel, you mentioned Little Blue, which was a media sensation for a while. That's not a new issue. That's an issue that's come up as does happen within coastal communities. So I think we can certainly build in some language if need to that demonstrates the reason why we're adopting this. And it's to have the ability to regulate what we know to be taking place, which is people abandoning vessels from other areas in our jurisdiction.
Thank you.
I just wanted to take a second and commend this committee. I think when you have questions and we take the opportunity when something this important to talk it out and to make sure that we've all heard each other and heard from staff, I think we come up with a very good product in the end that we all understand, and those who are listening can also understand better. So thank you for taking the time to be prepared, ask questions, and talk further into the conversation as we're moving along. I think it's so we have a motion on the table, and if all those questions have been asked and discussed, are we ready for a vote? Yes? All in favor, raise your right hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have some unfinished business with the consideration of a resolution adopting environmentally friendly landscaping and grounds maintenance practices, and Brian McWee, the Director of Projects and Facilities, is going to present.
Hello, good morning.
Welcome.
So I've been before you a couple times now. In November, we brought this to you.
Move over to the right.
To the right.
Sorry, better? So just to step back, we've been before you a couple times now. I think at the November committee meeting, we presented this and received feedback to proceed with a development of an integrated pest management policy and development of a trial study to implement these environmentally friendly landscaping and grounds maintenance practices. At the January meeting, we presented a draft policy, and based on that feedback from the committee, We brought this before you today. I believe it's attachment 2 in your packet, which is the proposed policy. In addition, what is before you is a proposal for consideration of resolution and the revised IPM policy for town council consideration. So I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. We did get some comments from Councilwoman Bryson right before the meeting. I'm not sure if I haven't had time to review it completely, so I don't know if we want to discuss that yet, but I'm happy to answer any other questions you all might have.
We have here attachment 2 that was handed out this morning. What is that?
Is that the markup from Ms. Bryson?
Yes, the one with red markings, that's mine.
Sorry?
That's the one I sent out to the committee this morning, and it's a hard copy of what I sent out, and shows, it follows the policy questions that we had last time, but there were some places where I didn't think that staff were not by intent, perhaps, but omitted some language to make it clear. So that is mine.
This is supplemental to the red marked attachment in our packet?
Correct.
Okay,
That's
thank you.
correct. Yes.
Any other questions? So I'm happy to proceed with the resolution that was provided to us. And I do understand that, Councilwoman Bryson, that you sent out an attachment this morning at 9:17, which I didn't get to open except for as I was walking out the door and then forgot my packet. So thank you to staff for filling in my packet for me this morning. But I was trying to read it as I was getting here. I would like to fully understand even the nuances in the language that were provided, as well as there were recommendations that I heard, but I haven't necessarily had a chance to hear. And even if I were to read the document that was on the dais this morning, it didn't completely capture everything that Pam, that you brought before us. So my suggestion is that we proceed with it as it was presented to us in our packets. And then, as we do with anything, have the ability to go back and read the red lines and the additional information and see what to do with that at a future meeting. That's one alternative. The other would be to place it, we wouldn't want to table it, right, Josh? Because then we would set it aside for this meeting and then bring it up at the next meeting after those things have been done. I don't want to belabor it. I know that you guys have been working hard. I know spring is coming. I know these issues are important to everybody, but I also want to make sure that we fully understand what it is that we're approving or recommending to full town council.
Madam Chair, if I could speak to
Sure, absolutely.
the issue.
Absolutely.
Believe me, I worked on this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I kept getting a lot of information. So that's why I couldn't finally do it until, well, I finished it yesterday late. But the editing that I set forth in here is based on the following. One is that we said that our policy was that applications would be approved or determined by town staff and not by the contractors. So that's a key policy issue. And there were a couple places where that was missing in this draft. So that's primary some of the red, is to make clear that the decisions are made by town staff and not by someone under contract, because that's a conflict of interest. So that's a lot of the red mark. And the second policy decision was clarifying the notice requirements, because we heard from the public that, and Ms. Salkas testified or stated this morning that she was out walking her dog and she didn't know what they're spraying and the contractor wouldn't tell her. So I know I got a lot of emails from folks who were walking their dogs and saw applications either being made or that had been made. So that's a key policy, is clarifying the notice requirements, and that's what some of the red marks do. And then in another case was where in one place it might say that this applies in a park, but then another place only says dog parks. So it's being consistent that way. So it's not changing the substance of our policy direction, it's just clarifying. And the only other thing that I think needs to be made clear, and I just noticed this in the resolution, and that is if there is an existing policy, and I think there's a question about whether there is or is not, then to state that this policy supersedes any existing policy. And that's a minor clarification that can be made under the now, therefore, in the resolution. So there's substantive changes in my view. They're clarifying edits to carry out those policies. And I think, as you noted, Madam Chair, it's getting ready to be spring, believe it or not. And so there's going to be a lot more people out of doors in our parks and playing ball on our fields. And the purpose of this is to protect our public, our humans, and also our pets, our dogs, our animals. I've seen people walk cats and birds. So it's to provide that kind of protection. And I think that we ought to go ahead and proceed because of the timeliness of doing this. And I think it also needs to be made clear that this applies to town-owned parks and fields and water areas. It doesn't apply to my backyard or anybody else's backyard. It doesn't apply to a lot of the area around on the island with 70% behind gated areas and a lot of occupation by other uses and other owners. So it's town-owned property, but focused on where the public comes and where they're affected by the possibility of pesticides being sprayed without them knowing it or being able to stay away from it with their pets and their children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, et cetera. So I think we ought to go ahead and proceed. And I apologize that I had some last-minute editing that may have created a bump here, but I think we ought to go ahead because of the importance of this issue.
Thank you, Patsy. Anyone else have any comments?
I appreciate the effort that Council Member Bryson has put in this, and generally her recommendations have a lot of merit, but I haven't read them since I only saw it when I got to this desk. Ms. Owens has also made some language changes. Personal preference would be for the matter to be given further consideration by staff of both of these recommended amendments in language. I suspect many of them are quite good and so forth, but I would be more comfortable having known that staff has looked at them and what their view is, and that I've looked at them, because I haven't looked at them at this point. So I would recommend that the matter be put off till a subsequent meeting.
Thank you, Steve. And to that point, as I'm trying quickly to accommodate, read through, there are a few that I've pulled just on a quick read that I think it does warrant staff being able to have their eyes on it. And for instance, under procedures monitoring, number 2, there's an edit that crosses out, and there's a number of these that crosses out or adds language, but in this one, it was town staff and town contractors shall determine if pest populations are increasing or decreasing and staying the same, and determine when to use a controlled tactic. And town contractor has been circled and crossed out in red, which leaves just town staff. And I just need to know the practicalities of that. The folks who are on the ground all the time, the contractors, would be the ones who identify that, I would imagine, more readily. And then a phone call or a conversation with town staff as a collaborative effort. I can't imagine town staff being the ones in the parks and in the field, as it were, to be able to take up that role. So if we can agree, and I would even be happy to call a special meeting of community service and public safety, and once, in order to revisit this, once everyone's had an opportunity to read it. I know you worked hard on it, and there's important things in here, and I know that there are other people who have got things that they want to be heard on. So if we could agree to put this aside for today and bring it up at either our next Community Service and Public Safety Committee meeting, which is when, Ken? March. Or,
Madam Chair, I might suggest, I know that we are going to be considering scheduling some interviews before our next meeting. So perhaps at that time, we could fold in a special meeting on this issue as well.
that's reasonable, I
Maybe
think.
that's a compromise, because I am concerned about moving forward with the spring coming and people being out and about and not having notice about what's being sprayed.
I think that's a compromise I can live with. Would that make sense to staff? I think that we've set those meetings, is it the 21st, 24th, something? We're trying to,
I believe the date was the 27th, but somebody wasn't available, so we really haven't decided on a date yet, but we can do that.
okay. All right, with that said, Alex?
Yeah, just a question about
Sure.
process here.
Yeah.
Maybe this is for Mr. Gruber. Once the committee has decided on what we feel is appropriate to move on to full council, would then the policy be in front of our legal counsel before it's considered at town council?
Yes, sir. Well, typically, if it's a resolution, which I believe this has a resolution to adopt the policy, all resolutions and ordinances are provided to the town attorney, who then reviews them for completeness conform.
And it might be helpful to have that review done before our next meeting.
Possibly, although I will say, my understanding is the town attorney is getting ready to head out of the country and will be out for a couple of weeks. So timing wise, that may present some challenges, but we can certainly try.
But I think during the absence of the town attorney, someone else will step into those shoes. And so that person could do that review.
Well, we would have to get that from the town attorney because he would have to make that appointment because that's, I think, the only person that can appoint legal counsel is.
I think the mayor has that authority as well, but anyhow.
Okay, we'll
Okay,
have to
so
look
we
at that.
can figure that piece of it out
Yeah, we can do
later. If we can agree in, again, process, Josh, sorry about this. What is the process for us to take it off of the table for today and revisit it
What I would.
prior to or at our next community service meeting?
What I would recommend is entertaining a motion to continue this matter to a date certain. And that way, if the committee is supportive of that, we'll just automatically add that to the agenda for that date.
Would the maker of the motion like to, or did we have a motion?
I don't know.
I don't know if we even got to the motion, so thank you. Do we have a motion?
I think we need to figure out a date certain.
Well, can
Good
we,
enough for the date certain to be the next,
can we stipulate the next community service and public safety? If it's possible to arrange something prior to that, we can always
Right.
reconvene. Yes. So can we get a motion to do that, please?
well, I'll move that the consideration of the resolution be postponed until a date certain, which will be the next gathering of this committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Right hand?
I'm opposed because that's not a date certain.
March 18th for now, and we can accommodate something sooner. We will.
Yeah, if we can do that, but I just think anyhow, I'm not gonna say anything else.
If we can accommodate something sooner, I understand your urgency, but for now, we're going to delay. Thank you.
I personally would prefer that if staff look at these two proposals for changes in language, let us know what your views for or against are.
That's a good request. So, Brian, I'm not sure if you heard that, but I'm sure it was captured. And if you can just give us feedback with regard to that prior to our date certain. All right, and I have lost my agenda in here, so all the papers have moved.
Madam Chair,
All the are yours, thank you. And we are going to move into executive session to discuss appointments regarding boards, commissions, and committees pursuant to South Carolina Freedom of Information Act, Section 3470A1, related to, number one, Beaufort Jasper Housing Trust, and number two, the Housing Action Committee. Thank you.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. executive session, and having taken no action, I'd like to adjourn this meeting of the Community Service and Public Safety Committee. Don't think we need a motion for that. Just everyone have a good rest of the day. Thank you.